Good evening, everyone. What's going on? My name is Antonio Morales. I am the founder of the Liberated Self Therapeutic Services, LLC. To find out more information about the Liberated Self Therapeutic Services, LLC, you can visit us at www.theliberatedself.org. Now, this is our first episode of our Unpacking White Supremacy IG Live series, which is actually an extension of our project, Unpacking White Supremacy. And I'm going to read the intention of the project so that you can understand what the point of this whole IG Live series is for. This is our first episode. We're going to have an episode hopefully every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Before I get to my guest, which is going to come up real quick, I'm going to just read the intention of this project. So the intention is to spread awareness about the complex, nuanced ways that white supremacy infiltrates our lives, exploring it through a sociological lens as we unpack its adverse impact and engage in a process of psychological liberation and healing through the sharing of our personal narratives and collective lived experience. And so, in other words, what I'm trying to say is that focusing on white supremacy is basically looking at the root cause of some of the adversities that we deal with as Black and brown folk in particular. And so we often don't talk about white supremacy as something that we can link to our adversities because it's so normalized that it's like part of our culture. And so the point is to highlight the way white supremacy shows up in our lives so that we can identify it and acknowledge that maybe there's something not necessarily going on with us, but something that we're responding and reacting to that's in our environment. Okay, so that's the gist of that. I want to welcome everyone who's showing up. Shout out to all the people who are here. I'm going to get right into it because I was like 2 minutes late. So I want to make sure that we have enough time to go through this process. My first guest is Jeremy Osorio. And Jeremy actually is my brother. And what's interesting about Jeremy is that he's a few years younger than me. And I feel like when it comes to all of my family members, Jeremy is the person who I most have sort of impacted when it comes to having conversations around white supremacy. And of course, like the rest of us, Jeremy wasn't necessarily aware of how white supremacy sort of infiltrated his life, but as we had more conversations throughout the years, he became a lot more aware of how white supremacy has impacted his life. So I'm going to bring on Jeremy, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go through some questions that I'm going to ask him, and then we're going to have an opportunity to ask you all questions. If you have comments you want to share, if you want to ask us questions, you can do that. The goal for that is to make sure that this is a community experience. Now, as the very first IG live episode for this particular series, we're going to have some, trial and error going on. So please be patient as I work through this. Let's see. Mr. Jeremy Osorio, come in, please. All right. I don't see.
Give me 1 minute. I don't know what's going on here. Hold on. Here we go. Hey, here you go. What's going on, brother? What's going on, everybody?
I feel like I'm in Puerto Rico.
Look like you in Puerto Rico.
The flag is in the back representing. That's not the original flag with the light blue. That's the one with the dark blue. But we know what it is. So, Jeremy, we're going to get right into this because we only have an hour. And we have some minutes to actually engage with the audience for the virtual audience members.
Definitely.
So I already told them you was my brother, right? So that's all they know so far. But if you wanted to share something about yourself that you think is important for people to know, what would you share?
Definitely. I guess let's go with the one thing you mentioned. You were a big reason for me, opening my eyes to white supremacy and a lot of the things going on around me. Growing up, I was very oblivious to that. I just grew up and just thought it don't matter, just how I feel. Even though I think that I don't care whatever skin tone you are, whatever the case may be, my own thoughts and my feelings. it never bothered me, those things. I never thought about it that way. There's been a few times you brought to my attention, obviously we've had our moments where we had conversations, you brought to my attention situations where I should feel a certain way and things like that. And that really opened my eyes. And from there, I try my best to be helpful with like my friends and my family. Knowing me personally, I come off a little bit strong. My friends, some of them see here now, they know that I come off a bit strong with how I speak compared to how you speak about these topics. But it is true. It is true. You very helpfully opened my eyes to these things. And ever since then, I just see things totally different. I feel like, things have affected me in ways that I didn't even know up until those points. So, I'm glad I had you as a brother to help me out and figure that out. A lot of people, black and brown folk, a lot of us are very oblivious to these things. It's one of those things that I've even heard, my friends come to me and be like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm just looking at them like, you see your complexion? Like, come on. You telling me you don't feel the bias going on around the world? So, but it takes time, and it takes people around us to open our eyes. So
Yeah.
that was very, very beneficial to have you around me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And what's funny, one of the things you said was that a lot of us are oblivious because we are oblivious, right? And it's not because we're not intelligent. It's just that it's so in the fabric of our nation that it's almost hard to pinpoint when it shows up, right? It's the goal of this particular project is to bring awareness to it. Like, because there's many iterations of white supremacy that shows up in the world. And because it's part of the fabric of our nation, we can't see it, right? We can't
Exactly.
see it. And so
I mean,
really
we were taught at a young age,
What you saying?
We were taught this way, to think the way we do and move the way we do through the systemic racism going on in the schools and everything. I mean, I'm sure people on here already heard a few things going on down in Florida, for instance.
Goodness, Florida's a mess. No shade to any Floridians,
Yeah,
but I don't know how I do it.
man,
I would be losing my
crazy,
mind if I was in Florida.
Yeah, right. It was Florida, right? They mentioned, what was it? 2 black professors try to bring out the positivity in slavery.
No, I actually, I think
Or was that
Mr. DeSantis
or was it
talking
Texas
about,
or something?
he was trying to say that they want to put something into the curriculum where they look at the benefits of the skill sets that formerly enslaved people have acquired because of slavery. And so that's what I mean. It's absurd, but that's exactly what's going on in Florida. It's to sort of twist the narrative. Like, you can't talk about the benefits of slavery and sort of try to make it there's a benefit of slavery when there was more harm that happened because of slavery. You can't even utter the word benefit when you think about how the people that were impacted by slavery, right? Now, it might have benefited white folk because they dealt with like they got free labor basically, and nations have been built on the backs of African enslaved people, and so it might benefit white people, but it's not going to benefit either the people who were freed as slaves, right, or the people who were the generations to come after the people of their family members, ancestors who were enslaved. And so, but that's the rhetoric of white supremacy. That's what that is. Like, to try to make it to diminish and invalidate the experience of people who have ancestors that were enslaved. You know what I'm saying?
No, yeah, definitely.
It's like smoking
it's the truth.
what it is. Okay, so look, let me shout out some people because people like to get shouted out. So let me see if I could shout out some people. I think I need glasses though. We have, well, that's you, and then we have, I can't really see people's names. I see a few people. I don't really know your names because is that Doug? I see Doug. Is that Doug in the house?
I see Desiree, Doug.
Desiree's in the house.
I got a bunch of my friends on here. What's up, guys?
And I see a few other people that I don't really know their names. Big Body Smoke. Okay, welcome, Big Body Smoke.
That's one of my friends.
And I'm Jay Calloway. Welcome to you as well. I need glasses is what I really need. So in the meantime, let's get right into it. So you shared something about yourself a little bit, and you basically shared about how it was that you sort of became more aware of white supremacy in the way that it sort of impacts your life. There goes our cousin Jessica. See, the family's here today.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the family's
I love
representing today. And you know, here's the thing about
It's a
this.
family.
Here's the thing about this live that I really want to share. Like this series is really meant to be for us, you know, the voice of the people in a way that, because a lot of times when we're thinking about white supremacy and we're sort of having conversations in public spaces around white supremacy, it's always the experts, right? The people with the PhDs and the master's degrees and the professors and all the people that we think as the experts. And that's beautiful. No, we love that. We want experts as well. But we don't really get to hear from the average folk, you know what I'm saying? The people in our communities, our family members. And so the goal really is to make
Wow.
sure that you get to hear from us. Yo,
There
I
we
think
go.
your Wi-Fi is up over
Broke
there.
up on me. Yeah, he broke up on me. There you go.
And so for anyone who's interested in sharing your own narrative around your experience, your lived experience with white supremacy, DM me. And then what I'll do is ask for your email, and then I'll send you our guest form so that you can fill it out thoroughly. The reason for that is because I don't want no trolls. We're not doing trolls,
Hmm.
right? Like little secret white supremacists trying to hop into the thing and like trying to trick.
Yeah.
Not happening. Not over here. Just saying. So let's. So I love to do the
Get him.
icebreaker. This icebreaker I think is inspiring for me, and so I want to do the icebreaker with every guest that comes on to this IG live series. And so the icebreaker is really going to ask you, when you think about where your people. First of all, where are your people from?
Well, let's see. You know, I love to say that I love to say I'm Taino. That's a big thing there. But my people from Puerto Rico, a hint of Dominican in them. But let's be real, our people from Africa. So
Okay.
we know the deal.
All right. So your people from a lot of spaces, it sounds like, right? So, but really from Africa, ultimately. So when you think about your people, right, and you think about your ancestors, the people that came before you, what is one positive characteristic you think that you inherited from your people? And,
Positive characteristics.
and how does that show
Hmm.
up in your life today?
Mm. That's a good one. I mean, you know, there's many things that I've gotten from. I'm going to use family. You know, I feel like I've learned a lot growing up from my family about like, you know, trying to be a little bit more positive with things, but it's kind of hard. But one thing I've learned is how strong we are. That's like my biggest thing. You know, we could say zodiac signs or whatever you want to say it is, because yeah, I'm a Leo and every fierce or whatever. But I think it stems from my family and my background. You know, I'm very strong. I'm very loyal. I'm very, you know, I give off that like love and affection that I can give, and I'm gonna keep it 100 with everybody. You know, I don't sugarcoat it. I don't care if it hurts your feelings, whatever the case may be. So I think that strong-heartedness and care for people is what I really got from my family, and not just from my family. I think it stems from, you know, our people. You always hear about Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and just islanders in general having this like, you know, care, and we're very passionate and loving. You know, I think that plays a big role in all of us. I think all of us have that, especially that hardcoreness in us. So that's where it really comes from. I think it comes from our people. The fact that we've like always strived, living the way we do. You know, black and brown folk, for instance, from, you know, our ancestors from Africa and everything, even through the slavery and all that, it was always us breaking our backs, but striving through that the best way we can. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, there's different things. You know, I'm not going to fully disagree with the nonsense that we're talking about with the Florida situation, but I'm not going to say there's any positive stuff that really came from that. But you have to understand, I think that, you know, altogether, uh, the people that were going through that stuff, they stuck by each other the best way they can because they only knew they had each other.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that plays a very big role in us.
Yeah.
You know, family oriented. We're always caring about we're very open armed. I mean, our family alone, we know we're very open armed. We're willing to bring people in, and no matter what, even if it tears us down, we're willing to be like, yo, come here. Like, let me take in some of that for you.
What I'm
So
here.
I think that's.
No.
Mhm.
You say I'm saying what I'm hearing from that is that you feel like because of what we've gone through, like the hardships, the adversities, and so on and so forth, it sort of gave us a thicker skin, right? Like there's some things we can tolerate that some other folk can't tolerate, right? Just because when you think about sort of the historical piece of our lineage, right, when it comes to our ancestors, they really went through some shit, and it sort of reinforced us in some ways, right? In a way that we wouldn't otherwise be if we didn't deal with those adversities. I always say when it comes to adversities as well, like when adversity shows up in your life, like that's a perfect opportunity for you to show up because adversity is actually having you be more present. Yo, if something is really tough going on in my life, I need to really show up to this extra sharp, right? Because it's sort of, you're forced to. Otherwise, you'll be doomed, right? And so I get that part when you talk about our people, how sort of the facing of adversity has really fortified us in a way that some people are not. Which is why we can talk about tough subjects and not break apart, right?
Exactly.
And I noticed that other people, when we talk about subjects, certain subjects, they break all the way apart. They melt, right? Some people call it white fragility, but you know, that's really not having the fortitude to have difficult conversations. When you black and brown in America or across the world, you have no choice but to have difficult conversations because your experiences, you're sort of engulfed in an experience of hostility. You know what I'm saying?
We don't have that luxury and privilege.
Huh?
Yeah, we don't have the luxury and we don't have the luxury and privilege like, you know, a lot of the white folk that walk around and think they could just do whatever they want. You know, that nonchalant attitude that majority of white people that we know for a fact have.
Yeah.
It's that nonchalant that we can't have. And even when we do have it, it's still not really there. It just really comes off as just being oblivious when you're nonchalant about these things.
Yeah, because they don't have to think about it. So with that being said, in your own words, how will you define or describe white supremacy?
You know, there's so many different ways to describe it, but the way I put it, the best way is when you look at a society, you look at who's at the top of the totem pole. And obviously it's them, you know, white folks. You know, they get a lot of the benefits from things just being looked at. You know, look at them compared to me and for a job title. And obviously they'll be the first ones to get it, even if I'm more qualified. So with that being said, it's really the benefit of white folks and the fact that they are on the top of that totem pole. So that's how I really view it. I know there's so much more to it. We could get into depth with what it is, but to break it down the best way I can, it's that white supremacy is a form of, you know, white people being at the top, that they're the best race, you know, and the way especially how America was brought up throughout hundreds of years, you know, it's always been about what benefits the whites kind of thing, and not what benefits the collective human beings in America, you know, Americans at that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like even us now, we could say we're Americans. We have black African Americans, whatever. We still look at Americans, and I feel a lot of us think white, American, white, no different.
No, I mean, that's the default, right? The default is American, that means whiteness, which is not actually accurate, but that's the default sort of perspective that people around the world have. And even us, to some degree, right? When we think, well, then what am I really? Am I, because I even though I identify as American, I'm Afro-Boricua. That's how I identify for real. Like, that speaks to me more than American.
Right. I mean, I would say I'm Nuyorican. I'll say I'm Nuyorican before I'm saying I'm American, unfortunately to say, you know? So that's just how it is. So,
you know what I was hearing and what you were saying when you talked about, you know, white folk at the top of the totem pole? I was hearing sort of the wealth or the privilege that comes from whiteness. So when we think of whiteness, when we're thinking about like white skin or light skin, that's sort of in some ways commodified, right? So there's some value that's attributed to whiteness. And so a lot of times when you have the privilege of having a whiter skin complexion or tone, you walk through the world with almost like getting access and gaining access to spaces that we might not necessarily have just by showing up. So their skin complexion and what it means to be white gives them sort of these accesses of spaces that we wouldn't have and opportunities that we wouldn't have. And it's all around sort of the wealth that's attached to whiteness, right? We don't often think of skin complexion or tone as wealth, but it really is.
True.
There's studies that show, right, that if you are a college educated black man who has a higher degree than say a white person who doesn't have a degree, and just because you're black and because they're white, that person might get the job before you just because of that, right? And so I think that's an important point, and that's what puts them on the top of the totem pole, which is obviously white privilege, right? But we got to think of whiteness as sort of wealth, like it's commodified to have value, right? And when you're not white,
it's more than just looking at the person and saying they're white. It's that the whole idea that when you look at a white person, unfortunately, the belief is that, like, you know, they're more trustworthy because you're white. There's more like, I can trust you to take care of this job better than the next person. And usually that's the case, unless I feel like the only time that it isn't the case is probably when it comes to physical labor. You know, me being in the landscape field, I mean, I've heard people say stuff like, dude, I would love to have a bunch of Mexicans and Ecuadorians working for me because they get busy, compared to having a bunch of young white guys working for me. You know, and it's so crazy to hear those things. But that's the only time I feel that they don't get that positive looked at. You know, that's literally the only time when it involves that hard work and getting down and dirty. I'm not saying there ain't white guys out there. There's a bunch of white people I know that get down and dirty just like the rest of us. You know, that's not what I'm saying. It's just the fact that, you know, you'll look at me and say, I'll work harder than the next white man, for instance, than the white man, but he'll still get a better position than me because he fits that profile. You know, if I'm going to be the face of a company, I rather prefer a white person's face as the company, because you get that full-on American blue collar, you know, whatever the case may be, kind of style. It's like you look at that and it's like, all right, that makes sense.
Represent is like more marketable for your corporation or your company.
Exactly. It's better to put a white person's face up than it is to put the black and brown folk person's face up, you know?
We have some comments in here real quick. Let me look over here what people are saying, because people are chatting up a storm.
Yeah, let's do it.
Something about being more American. Exactly. Okay, so Las America. Well, we know that we're more indigenous here anyway than anyone else that has come here to colonize these lands, and we understand that this is really not America, right? I mean, it's the name is of America, just like my name, Antonio Morales, is a colonizer's name. America is a colonizer's name. You know what I'm saying? I don't have an indigenous or an African name, right? And America doesn't have an indigenous name. I mean, that's not the indigenous name. I don't even know what the name. I should check that out, right? What's the indigenous name of the Americas? I know Puerto Rico is Borinquen, right, which is the indigenous name of the island. So anyway, with that being said, when you're thinking of when you're thinking about experiences of the various iterations of white supremacy that you've experienced, I want you to see if you can name one experience that you sort of want to highlight and sort of illustrate, so that we could really get how white supremacy has impacted you in a specific way. Now, I'm sure there's many other iterations of white supremacy that you experienced, but just name one. And then when you name that one, just sort of illustrate how come you're naming that, what's the experience behind that, so that we can get a better sense. Because there might be people dealing with similar situations that you've dealt with.
Gotcha. All right. I'll, you know, it's funny. I wanted to bring this up and then I didn't, mainly because it's still kind of relevant, but I'm going to, for not just me, but to be able to speak up for people that's in my shoes as well. So pretty much I'm a supervisor at a landscape company. And, you know, through the years, I've been at this company for 6 years. You know, I've been there for a while. I like this. This is what I do. I started off with no prior experience. Now, it's not like I moved up quick. It sounds like I did, but I'll explain how, in my understanding of how I moved up quickly. And pretty much it's from working with the people that I worked with. You know, I originally started off as a gardener. I worked around these 3 older white dudes. They showed me how to get busy and get the job done. You know, obviously my brother-in-law was a big thing for this company. He worked there originally. He got me in. So that's the starting point right there. You know, I took a white dude to get me in. That's okay. I couldn't know anybody, but that's not the situation. Now the situation is me becoming a supervisor. You know, I worked very hard, as hard as I did, like a lot of people that I know at this company, or people that have left, or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of us that worked really, really hard, but yet we didn't get any recognition. And from that, you know, we felt like there was no moving up in the company. Now, I'm not saying there isn't. I'm not saying any of that. I'm not trying to ruin my own reputation here. But the point I'm trying to make is that, you know, as hard as I worked and I thought that was getting noticed, I felt like it wasn't. It even got to the point where I was a gardener just trying to get a foreman position, you know, run my own little team. And to be told that, listen, we're hiring on a guy that, you know, this white cat that came from college. He had like a couple years in a degree for like study of dirt. And he's going to be my foreman, but I have to teach him how to do the job. Now that didn't click with me at all, right? So when and this was during the off season. I was told this because, you know, we get laid off a little bit and then we come back when the season, you know, popping again or whatever the case may be. So long story short, that guy ended up leaving about a week later. I came in and I had to straight up tell my boss, like, listen, you know, you wanted me to teach this guy. Now, why not just put me in that, you know, that position?
Yeah,
Like, give me that position and I'll show you. He was hesitant and everything. You know, he was a young Jewish cat. He wasn't Hasidic, but he was still had his religious ways, tattoos and all, whatever the case may be, right? So he decided, you know what, best case scenario, let's try it out. So because of him, that's where it started. But it also took me to go to him and say, listen, I'm either gone or you put me in the position. And he didn't want to lose me because he knew I was a good worker. Now, that's where, to me, I understand that that was my work ethic. But here's the kicker for me now. To get my supervisor position, right? All this time I'm working and getting busy, being told, listen, you're doing a great job doing this. I can't believe you're taking care of a big, you know, a big property that have all these people in there, all this stuff, just for that same guy who put me as the foreman to make me, you know, he's giving me supervisor work so I could learn, so I could prepare. Then he goes and hires the supervisor, and this supervisor is you know, a little bit older than me, young white cat. He's cool. He's my boss now. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, long story short, if it wasn't for the supervisor that I had, who is now my boss because the other guy left and he took his position, you know, he was the one that stuck his neck out for me and reached out to the bigger boss and said, listen, I want this guy. I think he's fit for the position of supervisor. You know, let me make him my supervisor and we'll work from there. So even to this day, I tell them that. I'll tell the big boss that. They'll tell me, no, it's my work ethic. But in reality, I know if it wasn't for my white boss, which, you know, he has a Hispanic background, but he grew up white. Okay. So, and he looks white. He's white. So he's white.
I mean, you know, there's a lot of Hispanics that are technically not black or brown or white. I'm just saying.
No, yeah, of course, of course. I mean, he has Mexican in him, but no, he never grew up with that. His family didn't teach him anything about it. He grew up white. Right, from southern white, whatever. But anyway, it took him to stick his neck out for me to get the position. Not my work ethic, you know, not how much I've done, you know, how much sweat, blood, tears, you name it. I've done it at this job. I've gotten busy. I've made it my home. This is that type of work that I love to do. Now, because of that, though, it made me a little bit iffy about the rest of the world, and it made me iffy even at this company, you know, that like it had to take a white person to stick their neck out for me to say I deserve a position rather than how hard I work. And I feel a lot of people go through that. A lot of people like us definitely go through that. We are not looked at as,
you know what's crazy?
We are.
Let me say something because I have to interrupt you about this. You're right on point because oftentimes, and it's not even any kind of positionality, including your degrees, your academic degrees, right? All of it has to be stamped by the approval of white folk in order for you to qualify for anything next. Same thing for, you know, our degrees. People who have gotten their college degrees, whether it's 4 years, or 6 years, or 8, whatever years it is, a PhD, or a bachelor's, a master's, right? That really is the stamp of approval. It's almost like when you think about like the award show, like for example, the Oscars, right? Like if a black or brown person wins an Oscar award, all of a sudden they're approved. Because that's the white stamp of approval. And it sounds like you're dealing with it on obviously in a different level, but you're saying to me that your experience in the workplace, first of all, you've dealt with differential treatment is what I'm hearing, right? And so there's like lowered expectations of you because you're not white. And despite the fact that your performance is on point, there still was a lowered expectation of you. However, when a white person or someone who exists in close proximity to whiteness comes in and gives and basically approves you, so you're like stamped, then you got the position or you moved up. But it was through somebody who was white that gave you the sort of that green lit you, right? Like he's good, we approve, and that's across the board, right? Like when we think about black and brown folk and how we move into spaces that are predominantly white, like we really have gatekeepers that are there, right, that give us permission to be in those spaces or not. But it's whether they think we qualify or whether they think we're safe or whether they think we're not a threat and so on and so forth that allows us to be in those spaces. And so a lot of times when you see black and brown folk in white dominant spaces is because some other white folk had to sort of give them the stamp of approval, and which is what I'm hearing from what you're sharing with me.
And then you'd be surprised because, obviously, like I said, I'm a supervisor now, so I go out, I talk to clients and things like that. There's some clients that are black, for instance, that I've had those conversations with. And it's actually funny because I've had one guy in particular, uh, um, his name is Anthony. He's a real cool guy. I'm not going to say from where or whatever the case may be. But, long story short, I've met, I've gone there, have our conversations with him about work or whatever. And I remember, one time I brought up, brother, this is how it is. You know how it is for us black and brown folks sometimes. And he smiles and he looks at me and he's like, brother, listen, if my bosses found out I was even having this conversation with you, it'd be clipped for me. And I'm like, see, that's what I'm talking about. The unfortunate truth that this is what it is. I can't even sit here and have this conversation about, what we're going through in our lives without the fear of thinking there's some white person behind us breathing on our neck saying, oh, yeah, you're talking about that? Really? Oh, wow.
Retaliation.
You know what? You might not be fit for this position because you're talking about stuff that is discriminatory and, all these other things that they want to say when in reality, it's like you want to look at them and be like, but we wouldn't have any of this going on if it wasn't for your people, like
You're talking about
you try to be professional.
you're talking about the backlash and retaliation that some people experience in the workplace when they speak about their lived experience. I mean, I dealt with that myself, right? Like in my previous job, like I dealt with the illest backlash, right? The retaliation was serious. I said a few little things like, yo, I'm not really feeling the vibe over here. Something's like off. They came for my neck. Like they really, really was like the defamation, like everything. They was really trying really hard to get me to shut the fuck up, ultimately. So when you're thinking about this experience though, like in the workplace, how do you think that impacts you in your life? Just thinking about just that experience, that one thing, how does that impact you in your life?
Well, I'll say this. In the very beginning, when when the situation first came up and I started thinking the way I did, it made me really sad and depressed. And the reason for that is because, it made me think to myself, like, damn, like, it really is about the people but I think it's, for me personally, it's about the skin tone, And with that being said, it just, I really, at that point, I really thought negatively a lot. I tend to come off as very, I don't like to sugarcoat things, but even with myself, because we are our own, worst judge, we go the hardest on ourselves. So I went the hardest on myself at that time, and I told myself, you know what? Like, this is so fucked up, and this is probably what I got to deal with the rest of my life. Like, how do I expect to get anywhere? And I kept thinking that I'm just going to be another, statistic, living in the hood, getting wasted all the time, high as hell all the time, saying, fuck it, I die, And I'm not going to lie, to this day, I still have those thoughts. I feel like a lot of us do. That's normal, unfortunately to say. It shouldn't be, but it is normal for us. So it impacted me in a way where I was just down for a long time. And my way of trying to get over that, it was turning to, smoking and drinking and all this jazz. But later, as I got older, because like I said, there's a few years now, been in the position or whatever the case may be. And now, as I get older and have opened my eyes to things and realized that, nobody can make me happy other than me, I started using this. Now that I have my foot in the door, for instance, with, this company, I try to look out for my black and brown brothers. I'm always trying to help them out. And I'm not saying I don't help white folks. I'm going to help them too. That's just in my nature to help. But, I'm more willing to be more real with my black and brown brothers that I see at my job or anywhere at that matter. So with that being said, it helped me from my lowest low. It took myself to uplift myself and say, listen, you can't be down in the dumps anymore. You know what it is. And no matter what happens, like, even though this is the way life is and society is, that don't mean you have to just accept it. Because, if we think about the slaves, 400 plus years of fighting, trying to fight through slavery. What is the 70, 80 years that I'm probably going to live, hopefully longer, obviously, but what is that of me fighting and hoping for the best for the future generations, and so on, kind of thing. So it actually eventually it motivated me. It took me to motivate myself through the situation, but I needed to go through that situation to see firsthand. Because like we've mentioned, in the past growing up, I was oblivious. I didn't think anything. I treated everybody the same. I'll still treat everybody the same, but at least now I know there's bias in the world that I didn't see before.
Yeah.
So I'm using that now to help uplift me and everyone around me.
But even before
so I
that
think
point,
that,
let me ask you, because I think it's important. You said you felt sort of sad and depressed. Can you sort of, because yes, you was able to sort of transcend that or overcome that, right? But can you speak about sort of what made you sad or depressed based on your experience in the workplace?
yeah,
Because I think the reason why I'm asking that specifically, because that's where a lot of us get stuck. There's no like overcoming shit, right? There's like, if you talk about like substance use, like you were just talking about and describing as a way to sort of self-medicate, right? A lot of people stay there. So there's no like, I was depressed or sad and I moved on and I overcame, right? There was like, there's a lot of us who don't have the wherewithal or the ability yet, right, to sort of transcend that experience because maybe we don't have an environment or we don't have a support system and so on and so forth. And we're sort of isolated in our own experience in a way that keeps us stuck there. So can you expand on how come you felt depressed or sad as a response to your experience in the workplace? Like, what was it? What was going through your mind about yourself as you sort of dealt with this?
I'll get into it. No sugarcoating it. I felt like garbage. I felt like no matter what I did in my life, from here on to the day I die, nothing mattered. Nothing I'll do, no matter what I did, it's not going to matter. So even at a regular, just a landscape job, had me thinking about my whole entire life as a whole during that process, going through that. So that's why I was so down in the dumps. And I did self-medicate and, a lot of drugs and drinking and stuff. And I hope that a lot of people that are watching this or eventually, whatever the case may be, going through this stuff, you got to learn to break free from that because all those things are temporary. So going through that stuff, and even then, those temporary happiness, when you start to, how can I explain? It's like being addictive, being addicted to something, drugs, whatever. We get addicted and we get stuck because that's our fulfillment is what we're feeling, that happiness that we aren't getting from our lives. So during that time, that's what I was going through. I was just so down, man. I mean, like, it was bad. It was bad. I didn't care about life. There's jokes that I make with friends that are very dark humor. I make a lot of dark humor jokes because I feel like you have to sometimes. But those times was like making jokes about death and talking about like, fuck it, I die tomorrow. Like, y'all niggas ain't gonna care. Nobody's gonna care about me, Nobody's gonna give a shit. But, I always have to say but because going through all that, I do also have to bring up that positive only because that's how I grew from it. A lot of people I know still going through stuff down in the dumps. I mean, I got friends now, I'm not mentioning no names, but I got friends now going through similar scenarios and, being sad and being caught up in situations. It's just so messed up. But I know they're going to be fine too, mainly because not only that they have me, but they have a lot of our friends around us that are all we try to be uplifting to each other. But yeah, just going through that during the time, I didn't feel like I was worth a damn in this life, in this society. And unfortunately it is true. You don't really grow fully from it. I still have this thought in my mind that like, I'm still just a speck in the world and me being a little speck in the world is not going to matter. Us doing this live right here is amazing to me because we get to talk and have people listen in and it'll get, uploaded on YouTube or whatever and other people will be able to hear it. But I won't lie to you, even a small little part of me feels like this is still not enough. It's not enough for us. It's not enough for the people around us and the people going through these types of things. So, talking the way I do it's bringing all those sad memories back. But that was the case for me, man. I mean, the shit sucked. Life sucked at that time. I needed to find happiness, and that was drugs.
And so,
and
well, You know, substance use is an interesting conversation because um, people sort of attribute being high or under the influence as happiness when what's really happening is sort of this chemical reaction in our brain, right? When it comes to like sort of releasing these sort of feel good sort of hormones
Those
and stuff
euphoric
that
feelings.
with the
Yeah.
drug or that whatever it is that we're using. And so and obviously that makes sense, right? This is why people they get lit because it feels good. Nobody gets lit because it don't feel like we get lit because it feels good, right? But what's interesting is you brought this up a couple of times, but what I'm hearing is not only when we talk about the impact in your life, we're not only talking about like you feeling depressed or sad, we also talking about the fact that you felt you had to resort more to substances in order to sort of deal with and cope with that experience that you was going through at the moment. And we often don't think about that, right? Like we don't think about like how substances are used a lot of times to self-medicate as a response to what we're experiencing in our environment. We think, oh, we're just getting lit, but people are not cognizant of the fact that you're not just getting lit. You're making yourself feel good as a form of self-medication because the environment that you live in and that you're experiencing in your day-to-day life is toxic as fuck towards you, right? Like it's like, and that's the thing about white supremacy that we don't get to, and look, there's many iterations of white supremacy. It's differential treatment, is racial discrimination in the workplace, it is mass incarceration, it is Karens or Kens coming for you. I mean, I could go down the list of different iterations of white supremacy. We could talk about transphobia. All these sort of different iterations of white supremacy sort of make your lived experience feel unbearable. And so we have to or we think we have to sort of resort to substance use in order to sort of alleviate the symptoms or the stresses that come with that experience. And we often don't talk about it like that. We just talk about it like you're just like, you'd like to get high or you like to fucking get drunk, whatever it is. But actually,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the whole story. And what's interesting about
Yeah.
it, people are expected to sort of overcome their sort of challenges with substance use without the environment shifting, right? In a way that it sort of we shouldn't have to self-medicate from our environment. That's unnatural, right? But because we live in an environment that is sort of infused with white supremacy, which is unnatural, we sort of have to do something else. And some of us, we don't have to do something else, but some of us choose to do that in order to sort of, make it from one day to the next. So now, besides your shift, right, in your mindset, is what I'm hearing, was there one sort of self-care practice that you took on, besides like drinking or smoking, was there a self-care practice that you can point to that sort of supported you with sort of overcoming that type of experience?
This is where, honestly, it's not like I've done any research or anything. It's really been, part of it's obviously with you having these, our deep brotherly conversations about life and stuff like that and opening my eyes. Also having sort of conversations with friends and other family members and things like that. So I think what it is was what helped me have a realization that I don't need to be putting myself down because of this is the fact that I'm thinking of my family and my friends. I see that what they go through. So that care that I have for others and being able to communicate with others, like my friends and my family, I feel like that communication with you and with everyone made me realize, okay, I can't be selfish to myself and to them. I have to think about, I have to, like, what I can do now to help me and my environment and the people around me. Like I said, I got my foot in this door at the job, for instance. So I'm trying to be more helpful to my black and brown brothers that I see at this job, going through similar situations, communicating, just trying to be as understandable as possible. So I think it was really that. I think it was, that communication with somebody else. And a lot of times I feel like all of us don't have that, especially us as black and brown folk, and especially even us as men. We could talk about whatever the case may be or whatever, but let's be real. Us as men, we don't like to talk about our feelings. So having those feelings conversations is what helped me, you know, get a leg up now from my depression and from my frustrations about the scenario that I'm going through and how the world is. So I think that's where it really came from, is just communicating and taking in the love and support and me giving out love and support.
That sounds like what I'm hearing, what you didn't say, but what I'm hearing is sort of one of your self-care practices is tapping into your community, whether that be your friends or family or colleagues that you're close to. And so, and we often don't understand how healing tapping into the community is, right? Into our communities. We sort of take it for granted. Like when you have people that love and accept you for you and you don't have to watch your back from, that's a powerful healing thing, right? Like, yo, I feel safe in this space. I'm with my boys, or I'm with my girls, or I'm with my siblings, or my cousins, or my family members, or these dope ass colleagues, right? Like, community could be so healing, and so that's what I'm hearing you're saying, because there obviously is the part of community. I don't know who the fuck is cutting their grass right now. Like, come on now, like I can't hear myself. Like I don't know what's going on. So what I'm hearing is that you're tapping into community. Inside that community, you're allowed to express your grievances or the sort of share about some of the challenges that you're dealing with in a way that's safe and that you feel validated and affirmed. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that's safety. When you said safety, I feel like that word right there hits the nail on the head, because when we are around the people that we're able to be, able to express ourselves, that is a safe space. And that safe space is a very big thing that all of us need. Everyone,
Yeah.
all of us, especially our black and brown brothers and sisters. We need that safe space because the world is not safe for us. Look at all this stuff, look at during COVID, how crazy all the Black Lives Matter movement and all this stuff going down. Like, now we want to take a stand, now we're taking a stand. It's not like we haven't people taking stands, but we need that safety. And I feel like that's the biggest thing. Like, for instance, with that scenario, with the Black Lives Matter movement, it was all, to me at least, it was all about safety. Wanting to be able to walk down the street and the cops, going by with the sirens, and I'm not looking back thinking, oh, they coming for me. What did I do? I don't feel safe out here in the streets. Not just in the hood. I mean, like in general, I could walk in the whitest neighborhood and feel out of place. That lack of safety is what we go through. And I think the safety is what is a big deal for me, and what helped me transcend that depression and everything that I went through, was being able to be safe and be able to have people around me that make me feel safe and be able to communicate my feelings.
Yeah, no, I hear. Listen, I love community. This is why I love to like do barbecues and stuff, because I feel like that's my only time to be in community, really, right? When I sort of create spaces for us to like be together and like be us. So, so now with that being said, I just want to sort of open the floor, or the virtual floor, for the audience members. If you have any questions or comments, or you want to sort of share anything that we can shout out, because I feel like, or if you resonated with anything that you heard Jeremy speak about today, because I feel like that's important in our shared experience and collective experience to sort of affirm each other in that way. So, I mean, the virtual floor is open if anyone has questions. I see somebody said, oh, it's healing mother of two. I think that's our cousin too, isn't it? Isn't that?
That's Erica,
that's Erica.
I believe.
Oh, for her as well, community. Okay. And Desiree said, you're also a ball player now too. So you play ball. That's another way of self-care.
Yeah.
Anyone have
playing basketball with the guys?
Anyone have? Oh yeah, you do basketball every Thursday, don't you?
Tuesdays and Thursdays. Oh. Today I took a break just because it was too hot out.
Yo, it's mad hot out. Like, it's mad hot.
Like 1,000 degrees, man.
On the hottest day in American history. I don't understand what's going on over here.
That
questions,
global
comments,
warming.
anything that anyone wants to share? Usually when I mean, in my previous lives that I did before with the mental health field, people was always chiming in and asking questions, and I don't know what's going on now. And I never had space, because it was so like, the agenda was so like packed to the end, so I didn't have room. Now I've obviously created space that, in case people had to chime in. Someone talked about community is so important. That was Shedley, and then we have Someone said, obviously, we try to number it out. I'm telling you, I need glasses. And hopelessness is a catalyst for that path. Hopelessness is a catalyst for what path? Is that I wonder what they were talking about with that. That was from Exmoor, LMSW. I'm not sure what they were talking about with that. And then somebody, I think Erica was saying she will fuck someone up. Okay, Erica.
Let's see. We got some that just came in towards the end. It looks like. I
Okay,
mean,
this is Sister Soul Healing. I joined late, but I'm looking forward to more conversations. Okay, welcome, Sister Healing. Oh, and then we have somebody here said we have to go above and beyond, just get that opportunity. That resonated. Okay. Oh, we got to go above and beyond just to get that opportunity. That's so real, right? I was just talking to a client about that today, and one of the things that really sort of strikes me about that is what's beautiful, because in one sense you're obviously right. We have to go above and beyond, right? We can't just be average as far as our performance. We got to like kill it. But one of the most beautiful things about that that I've recognized in myself is that fortifies us and sharpens our skill set in such a way that when we're actually ready to compete with our non-melanated brothers and sisters or folk, we are so much more advanced in a way that they wasn't even preparing for. Because we're forced to have to go above and beyond, it sort of gives us a head, like a leg up, or not a heads up, but like an advantage. I've noticed that in my own professional life, thinking about sort of these sort of average type of mental health professionals, and then thinking about the work I do, like, well, my shit is like on some next level shit. But because I had to sort of show and prove over and over again and go beyond the sort of lowered expectations they had of me in the field. And I had a lot of experiences in the field, in the social work field or mental health services field, where a lot of my supervisors and even colleagues sort of underestimated my ability to do the work that I do. And it's funny because through all those years of being underestimated, now that I'm a private practitioner, sort of with my own private practice, when I go out in these streets and do my work, when I do like when I work with community orgs and different organizations and stuff, I kill it. But because I had to create that sort of muscle, right?
You had to show it off, though. You had to show what you were capable of.
Now, like, what you gonna say?
Yeah.
So substance use conversation. Someone, okay, that's what you was talking about. Oh, say, so you was talking about previously when
I was like being down and depressed.
Is the catalyst for substance use. That's very, very true,
right?
And we can see that across our communities, all across the country, right? When we're thinking about how substance use is sort of hopelessness is the catalyst. It's like the road that way. Well, fucking life sucks. I might as well get high. You know what I'm saying? I might as well fuck myself up. And what we don't understand about that sometimes, as much as it alleviates the symptoms in the moment, right, it's very, very self-destructive. And I love my red wine and stuff, so I get it. I mean, I used to drink harder liquor before when I was younger, but I really don't got the tolerance no more. Thank goodness. You have something to say about that, Jeremy?
No. I mean, you mentioned one thing earlier about like when we were talking about going above and beyond and how like we have our skill sets because of that, But the one thing that I thought about as well is a lot of our Black and brown brothers who don't think that way, who don't think to themselves, they have an acceptance now when they do hear about this, and they're just like, well, fuck. Life is fucked up for me because I'm as dark as Akon, and everybody's gonna look at me as like I walk down the street. Oh yeah, he's a drug dealer. Automatically a drug dealer. Oh, he's got something wrong. There's always something wrong, and when you got people like that, that's when you get caught up down that rabbit hole, especially with the drugs and the substance abuse. Because let's be real, it's been generational hurt from drugs. Let's go back to the 80s, the crack era and all that. I mean, we know who brought it in. They brought it into our communities so that way we can continue to be stupid. So that way we can continue to just get high. and not care about the world. And that's what the drugs did to us. You know, even now, drinking and all this stuff, we all get caught up into it because, like you mentioned earlier as well, that's also where our own hurt comes from. You know, it's us fighting our hurt and trying to numb that pain that we feel, even though later down the line, you know, a couple days later or whatever, it's coming right back in full force. That hurt that we're feeling and the depression, and then we go right back to it again. So then now we're all addicted and we're stuck. But that, you know, a lot of us don't know how to go above and beyond or understand that, you know, or we do know that we have to go above and beyond, but we're just like, what's the point now?
You know what's so
And there's
crazy?
a lot of us that are stuck there.
You know what's so crazy? You use the word addicted. I like to use the word sedated. Right?
Mm-hmm.
When we are self-medicating, right? When there's a liquor store in every corner in the hood, when we have access
Right down the block right here, a
right,
block away.
right, and we partake in this stuff, right? In the substance use, we are sedating ourselves. And I heard, I don't know if this is a true story, but there's a legend that back in the day they used to give the enslaved Africans black cake during the holidays. Now black cake has alcohol in it, right? So it's like a cake that's infused with alcohol. But it was so that, you know, while the people in, you know, Massa and their families were celebrating during the holidays, that they would sedate the enslaved folk as a way of, while Massa is getting lit, the enslaved folk wouldn't rebel, right? So they would, here, take some of this black cake and, you know, get inebriated, get drunk. And I see that, and I don't know if that's true or accurate, but that's a story I heard. I don't know how true it is, but it makes sense, because when we think about how many times people in our community are sedated, it's like, if we're sedated, we're not in our right state of mind, we can't tap into sort of our consciousness in the way that we could if we wasn't sedated, and we definitely are not. We don't have the capacity in those moments to rebel. So it makes sense, you know, that they will put, you know, all these sort of liquor stores in our communities and shove drugs down our throats on purpose.
I'm pretty sure what you were saying, the scenario you used that you wasn't positive about, like the black cake thing, I really believe that's real, mainly for the fact that I've read somewhere that, all right, per example, like, you know how a lot of black and brown folk, when we go to the liquor store and we get liquor, majority of the time it's cognac. It's a dark liquor. So the reason for that was, back in those days during the slave times, they were trying to hand out, for the sedated reason. I read this somewhere. I don't remember. It's a while back, so I might be getting a little facts wrong here. But long story short, they used to hand out a lot of, like, the light liquors, like vodka, things like that, to try to get them sedated. But then the slaves found a way to make cognac, and it was black, it was dark, and that was our way of saying, this is my drink. You know, you can't give me your white drinks. I'm gonna drink. So now, and a lot of black and brown folk don't know this, but I don't know if how, like, really real deep into depth with this. Look it up. I promise you, I read this somewhere. But long story short, that's why majority of us who are black and brown, right, we all go straight to dark liquor. But it's instilled in us. Like me, you know, I love my Jack Daniels. You know, I go with dark. I don't like anything light. But at the end of the day, that's where most of that came from. During the slaves' times, the slaves were the ones that started their cognac and making it on the side. They had their own hooch. So that way, you know, they could get lit during their times when they were back at home from working. You know, that idea. Yeah, it's like that idea, like, you come home from work and you're like, damn, I had a hard day. Fuck it, let me get a drink. You know, that's very instilled into a lot of us, black and brown folk. We all have that, you know, I'm pretty sure we all gone through it. The people on here, and it's not just black and brown folk, obviously. We know everybody goes through that scenario, coming home from work and saying, fuck it, I want to drink something. But going back to what you're talking about, the black cake, I think that's why I believe what you're saying could be possibly true for a fact. The black cake scenario.
Yeah.
Because that's how it all started, the cognac and all that stuff. And that's why cognac is like Hennessy. Hennessy's the cognac. And who the fuck is drinking Hennessy all the time? None but black and brown folk. You don't see a lot of white people saying, "Fuck it, let's go get some Hennessy today." Hell
I
no.
mean, but how
They want
many?
some tequila or something else.
I don't
Vodka.
know. I don't know because I don't really hang out with white folk like that, so I don't know. So I don't know. I'm just saying, but it makes sense. And X more LMSW. Yeah, sedation. You're right. And so yes, sedation is the word, like to be sedated, because you think about it. I'm just responding to the person who's there.
Yeah.
Because I think we don't necessarily use addiction. The language of addiction is very pathologizing. I'm not going to debate the language of addiction. I'm just saying, when I think about us as Black and brown folk and what we deal with when it comes to our substance use, right? It is really to keep us sedated, and we've been conditioned and trained to sedate ourselves, right? And the same thing is true for psychotropic medications that are sort of prescribed by psychiatry, right? Like this sort of constantly sedating us, never allowing us to have an opportunity, a real true opportunity to look at the root cause of our discomfort or our dis-ease and the sort of environments that we sort of have to endure our lives. And so I think, so that's why I use that word. We also, so Sister Soul Healing says, we also don't realize how many chemicals are in these brand name liquors. Real talk. There's mad chemicals.
Absolutely.
The whole thing feels like chemicals sometimes when I drink it, right? When I drink some of the, like Fireball, for example.
Well, we all know that Fireball, guys, stay away from Fireball, is bad for you. But regardless of that, it goes even far beyond the alcohol or what's in the alcohol. We could talk about so many different things. We could talk about going to the doctor and how they're gonna give us, a shitty knockoff brand of whatever we need medication wise. But then the white person comes in and they're like, "Oh yeah, you're getting the best stuff." We another perfect example. A lot of our black sisters that a lot of them die during childbirth, and that's because unfortunately they don't get the good stuff. And
Well, and
literally look this up.
that's also because of the way doctors treat them in the medical establishment, right? So it's not just about like drugs, but it's also about like Black women are not heard in the same way that a white woman is heard, right? And so a Black woman could come in and talking about a symptom or something she's dealing with, and a doctor, because of their biases, be like, "Nah, you good," right? But if it was a white
Yeah.
woman, they're like, "Well, we need to really check that there."
hmm
But Black women don't have this.
That's when everybody gets on their toes when it's a white woman,
Right, and so
especially.
so it's really about like the differential treatment and medical racism, basically, is what it is. And so here we got some people saying keeping us far, right? We know what the alcohol and the substance. And look, I'm not saying that. I want to make sure that I'm clear on my stance when it comes to like substance use. I'm not talking about substance abuse. That's why I'm not using the language. But substance use, the sedation is one thing. But there's also some other things that are sort of, when it comes to like the psychedelic movement, for example, those are other ways that we can mess around with substances, but it's not necessarily to be self-medicated, but to sort of find a way to enhance and liberate our consciousness. That's a different conversation, but I just want to make sure, because I don't want to be part of that rhetoric of substances are horrible. Like no one should ever like partake in this activity when
Not
there's
always, yeah,
obviously
not
some
always.
benefits that do come from it. But I'm not talking about that right now. I just want to be
Mhm.
clear about my stance. Systemic racism keeps us sedated, right? And close. This is Callaway. And close. I need glasses. And close in so we can reach the better. We can't reach the better outlets. Or I can't to empower ourselves. Yes, systemic racism is intended to keep us in psychological locks, right? That's the whole point of
Mhm.
it. And so when we're psychologically oppressed, we cannot evolve into becoming not only the best version of ourselves, but self-actualized. Um, right. Okay. We are being challenged from so many. So Sister Soul said we are being challenged from so many angles: food, fun, air pollution, right, medications, everything. And I don't even think that's I don't even think that's only has to do with sort of white supremacy. Well, it does have to do with white supremacy, but it's more like even even white people are being impacted by that, right? When we think about, like, especially the working class and poor folk, which is crazy because they'll still vote for white supremacists. So many doctors are not educated. There's a lot of things coming in right now.
Yeah, let's look into these real quick. I like what people have to say, you know, being able to, and that's what I like about this, because it allows people to speak.
Right, we need to decolonize the medicine. That's right, because even psychedelics and the way sort of the psychedelic movement is moving now, it's super colonized.
Mm-hmm.
This is indigenous.
I'll use weed as an example, for instance, and that's not a crazy psychedelic or nothing. It's just weed. I mean, look at it in the stores now. But look at how many of our black and brown brothers are still locked up for weed.
No, listen, I get
like,
it.
Come on.
That's crazy to me. That's crazy. Anyway, look, so as a matter of sort of honoring our time, I want to make sure that we come to a close to this live. Jeremy, my brother, thank you for joining me in this conversation, the first episode of Unpacking White Supremacy, our IG live series. Again, it's going to be tentatively every Thursday at 7 p.m. Next week, we have another one scheduled, Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you're interested in sharing your own experience with white supremacy, meaning different iteration of white supremacy, please DM me, because then I will be able to email you. I'm going to ask you for your email, and then I'll email you the form so that you can look at the different iterations of white supremacy and then sort of expand on your own experience. So if you're interested in being part of this live, this is basically an open forum for our community members, black and brown folk in particular, and sharing your experience. And the goal is really to normalize like these conversations in a way that demystifies white supremacy. Because this white supremacy, like there's all these things, this white supremacy, like, people get offended when they hear it. Like, stop that. Like, what's the point? It's really, really impacting us, right? So if you're interested in having this conversation, if you want to be a guest on the IG live series, please DM me. And then I'll be able to request your email address, and then I'll send you the forms. The reason for that is because I'm trying to avoid trolls, because we don't want no, white supremacists sneaking into this stuff, because then we're gonna have an issue, and we don't want that. We want it to be so that it's a space that we can really share our experiences as a community and collectively validate and affirm each other through our experiences. Because sometimes when we're in isolation, we feel like we bugging. Yo, something is really wrong with me. Why do I feel this way? No, it's not you. It's the environment, right? So thank you, everyone, for showing up and spending time with us on this wonderful Thursday. I know you could be doing other things besides like chilling with us, but here you are. Wait, somebody asked questions. So how can we stop this? How can us black and brown people come together as one to build more of us and the kids? Well, I think part of coming together is creating community. And, this is just one example of community, right? Sort of creating the space for us to have these conversations. And so community is everything. Like when we build community, not only to build community, but while we're in community, to love up on each other. We forget that part. We forget the love part. Yeah. Let's be crazy towards each other when we're in community versus, let's love up on each other because we need that, right? If the rest of the world is against us, why come into space to be against each other when we could be in space?
Tribe vibes, sister soul healing, tribe vibes.
Tribe vibes.
We got to be our tribe. And I recommend doing this for the people that want to join and do these videos. I highly recommend it because, who else is really going to be able to preach this stuff? These are hard conversations that people have, and a lot of people can't do it. That's why I would recommend doing this, with my brother, being able to just preach your word and say what you got to say, because at the end of the day, we already know there's a lot of black and brown brothers and sisters, kids out there that don't know, they're not educated like this. They don't get to hear these things. So be able to have these conversations, be able to, this is a safe space is what I'm saying. This is a safe space. And I believe this is what my brother intended for this to be for us. Come on here, preach what you go through so that whoever's listening can connect with you and can connect and feel like they're not alone.
Yeah, and just to be fair, there's a lot of other spaces that other people have in these conversations as well. So we're just one of the very many few who are actively engaged in these conversations. And so, you know, so regardless, right, community is important. And so I just want to sort of end it there and thank you all. Well, I guess you said it, right? You sort of took us out with that sort of on that note. And so again, DM me if you feel like you want to share your story and be part of this IG live series. I mean, space is limited because it's only one time a week, and a lot of people are interested in being a guest already, and we just started it. So that's that. And if you want any more information about the Liberated Self Therapeutic Services, LLC, you can look on our website, www.theliberatedself.org, and look at the various services that are provided, not just psychotherapy, but other sort of workshops and programming, specifically the Liberated Self Seminar. The Liberated Self Seminar, for those of you who don't know, that's my antidote, right? When I think about these conversations, we're looking at sort of the root cause of the adversities that we face and how that adversely impacts our lives. And all of it sort of goes back to psychological warfare. And the only way, or in my opinion, the way that we can really start healing is to first liberate our minds from the sort of mind fuck, or the mind sort of warp that we're in as a result of white supremacy. And once we can liberate our minds, if we can get psychological liberation, then not only is healing possible, but our evolution is possible. How we transcend into the best version of ourselves, which I call the liberated self, is possible. With that being said, thank you so much. Power to the people. And that is all. Let me figure out how to motherfucking shut this off, because I don't know. I'm going to figure it out. All right. Have a great night, everyone. Be safe. Enjoy the heat.
Easy, everybody. Later, brother.
Later, brother.
Peace.
Let me see how I do this. Hold on.